Hello, guys and gals, me Mutahar, and what do you think is the one website on the internet where you can't have fun whatsoever? Can you go 24 hours without absolutely throwing a giant fit about something? Yes, that site is in fact Twitter. You already guessed it. Now, of course, my first mistake was signing on to Twitter and expecting the discourse to be healthy and not poisoned. But, Logan Paul, who I don't really follow on Twitter, I don't really interact or do anything with, he sort of lives to his own devices. I feel like Logan Paul could do things that are a lot worse on the internet compared to what we're about to discuss today. Give that man a flight to Japan and a good old DSLR, and we might see another goddamn apocalypse. Who knows? Logan is a weird guy, okay? But when he does something harmless, it gets to a point where Twitter has such an outrageous reaction that I find myself on his side, alright? It's a little wild these days, okay? God damn, it's a once in a blue moon scenario. Now, when it comes to arts and crafts, alright, TikTok is sort of the hotbed for it. A lot of people are making everything imaginable, cakes, whatever, butt plugs. Logan Paul has made something with old Game Boy colors. Alright, let's see what he's done here. Let's quick. This is actually quite juicy. So he gets a bunch of resin epoxy and then he basically lays it out. He gets a bunch of these Game Boys and Game Boy colors, dips them in resin, basically, yes, destroying them. And then he aligns them. And last but not least, he basically molds it in this clear resin container. And all of a sudden that makes for a cool table, right? God damn. Immediately I wondered, it looks alright, okay? Hey, at least he's doing some fun stuff, right? It is what it is. These are in fact Game Boys encased in resin epoxy. Of course, he even lights the table underneath for the RGB, because why not? That's what gamers do. Now, when I saw this, I was like, it's kind of cool, it's kind of whatever. But then I immediately noticed one thing on Twitter, and that's this quote tweeting. When that quote tweet number is even over 500, you know that people are trying to attempt a juicy little ratio. You might be like, but Muda, what's there to get mad over here? Well, let me explain something, okay? Because Logan Paul took 15 Game Boys and effectively destroyed them, there's a group of people out there saying, uh-oh, why is it that Logan would destroy 15 perfectly usable Game Boys and prevent anybody from having access to such beautiful hardware? Now, I understand from what I realized, some of these actual Game Boys he used were actually limited editions out there. But for me, immediately when I saw that, I was a little brain damaged, okay? This is a rough estimate of the total sales of just the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color, okay? 118.69 million units. Now, we didn't get no Fiverr scientists to sit down and identify how accurate these numbers are, but I'm going to assume that because of Nintendo selling out these systems and making a crap ton of money during the period, this may not be a wrong estimation. Effectively, most gamers from back in the day probably own a Game Boy Color sitting around. Dude, I probably have my good old-fashioned purple Game Boy Color sitting around with the pirated cartridge of Pokemon Blue and Red. Both the games were on it. It was kind of cool. But that's generally the vibe that I get out of it, okay? That's generally what I see. Now, even if you wanted to get access to a Game Boy or a Game Boy Color, the pricing online isn't exactly as scalpy as you would think, okay? I mean, it is kind of. For instance, this one person selling a professionally restored one for $166 Canadian, okay? So yeah, that's a professionally restored version out there. Of course, if you want to take a gamble, here's one red with no battery cover for $35. That price is what you're about expecting to spend to get your Game Boy or Game Boy Color, alright? Simple as that. In fact, even games like Pokemon Gold are priced higher than the fucking system itself. And if you really wanted to join the party and get the yellow Pikachu version, which only one kid I ever knew actually owned this, you can spend $93 and get it. So it's not terribly out of cost right now. It's not like it was the most expensive system that you can ever get restored. This shit isn't a Gizmondo, okay? It's not actually rare. This is something, if you gave a shit at all, you'd probably already own a Game Boy for the sake of playing it. Now, for a lot of people who jump into it, I feel like if it wasn't Logan Paul who did that arts and crafts, there wouldn't be this much negativity about it on the internet. I just absolutely can't understand the amounts of people who are getting this blasted over 15 Game Boys being removed from a pool of over 100 million out there. Now, don't get me wrong, I think every time Logan Paul gets involved in something like this, whether it be this or Pokemon cards, because of his celebrity status, the problem is people jump in and if it becomes a trend, yeah, That's where you get like artificially increasing prices. No doubt, Logan Paul absolutely screwed the market for things like Pokemon cards, okay? I remember reading a couple like days ago that the dude like literally spent about $3 million on like old OG Pokemon cards. And, you know, for some people when they see that happen, it's like, oh, total investment. But at the end of the day, nobody's gonna look at that arts and crafts TikTok and go, maybe I should just start buying up Game Boy Colors. Maybe they might be worth something these days, boys. Like, I don't think that was ever gonna happen, and I don't think people should have lost their marbles over it. But the discourse is rather interesting. You come across people who are like, but Muda, the hardware isn't that preserved. The hardware, there's dying hardware everywhere. Dude, hardware dies eventually anyways, okay? When it comes to most gaming consoles, they're all built to die. I've said this numerous times on my channel, where if you buy yourself like a restored PlayStation 3, an Xbox 360, or even if you move up to consoles from this generation or the last generation like PS4 and Xbox One, those systems, because of the complexity of moving parts inside them, are prone to even more failure than the ones that came before. When you buy Super Nintendos, or you buy Genesis devices, or you buy old PlayStation 1s, or really any old handheld, you are buying hardware that literally has a lifespan attached to it. Even the physical media we buy to preserve has a lifespan attached to it. You buy yourself a Game Boy cartridge, a DS cartridge, it's prone to eventually dying or corroding at some point. You buy yourself an old disc, you may end up coming across some form of disc rot. I remember back in the days of the Sega Saturn, it was actually kind of a big deal. But this is the genuine reality of physical media. It's eventually built to die. And so when it comes to preserving hardware or software, the best avenue we have is literally through emulation. I'm going to use PS3 as an example. Eventually, every PS3 will die. There is no official backwards compatibility from Sony regarding the PS3 unless you jump into cloud streaming, which isn't exactly an answer to anything. So when you look at shit like the actual PS3, the fact that we have RPCS3 as an emulator that allows us to play video games from that era preserved on modern PCs is pretty much like the final zenith of preservation of video games. So when you look at actual Game Boy Colors being used, 15 removed from the pool just for an arts and crafts isn't something to get that bent out of shape over. And if you gave a shit about preservation, well, let me explain something. We have FPGAs. You might be like, what's an FPGA? If you actually wanted to preserve like Game Boys, we actually have them preserved in the shape of analog pocket. Now this is obviously a much more expensive solution. There are also other avenues you can go into. For instance, like if you get a Mister, they actually have like Game Boy FPGA cores, which allow you to emulate the hardware as actually it's not really even emulation. It literally quite is that hardware, okay? It's got all the same beats, it's got all the same issues. If a game lags on an actual Game Boy Color, it will lag on FPGA hardware. That's how it's designed. And even as far as emulation goes, we literally have cycle-accurate emulation for Game Boy. For instance, this is SameBoy, the emulator you can download that is cycle accurate. Cycle accurate literally means that if you wanted to play a game in the exact same beats as the original hardware, that means no enhancements, no frame rate enhancements, no optimizations, no nothing. You want the original one-to-one experience, you can download software that literally provides that. And because it's the Game Boy Color, you're never going to have an issue with any device having a problem running this emulator. Because it's such an old device that literally grandma's vibrator could actually run the fucking application. That's how old it is. That's how old the hardware emulating is. So anyways, going back to the whole Logan Paul thing, some of the discourse was rather hilarious. Like, for instance, it's not about being able to play on them. It's about the fact that they're old and worth money. I think this is neat, though. I just see why some people would be upset with it. And then, this is a really good response. The value of shit in the retro game market is completely artificial, and they're no better than scalpers. These things were mass-produced, and there is a shit ton of them out in the wild. Plus, a lot of them look customized, so they're worthless to collectors. Now, do I personally believe that the way that this could have been avoided is a motherfucker could have emptied out the Game Boys and just kept the shells and called it a day? Sure. But at the end of the day, again, it's 15 Game Boys removed from a pool of about 100 million. It's not going to make a dent in terms of the value of these devices. It's not going to drive prices up. It's not even going to make a penny worth of difference, let's be honest. But sometimes the comparison is absolutely hilarious. Like, wonder if you would be saying that, if you would be saying the same, if you used a bunch of working PS5s to make a PS5 table or a GeForce 3090 to make a table of them when they are 100% functional. I'm gonna be honest here, Chief. All right, if the dude bought like PS5s and like 3090s, and if you found an actual stock worth of them to make a fucking table, I would kind of be blown away. I actually would clap my hands and say you've probably done what is in fact the most expensively stupid thing I have ever seen. But see, the comparison really isn't even the same at this point. One is a old, dried up piece of hardware from over 2 decades ago, and the other are brand new computer components that not even Jesus Christ can get his hands on, okay? Which I would say becomes the apple and orange comparison. But let's say that Logan did do that. At the end of the day, the dude bought 15 PlayStation 3s and encased them in resin, would probably be me sitting here right now saying how stupidly hilarious that is. But again, a man is entitled to spend their money exactly how they want to. And this, again, may I remind you, is a little less egregious. So yeah, I kind of wanted to make a video talking about how stupid this entire situation really was, kind of how much I laughed at it and the discourse around it. I kind of wanted to address the L take that I had by actually enjoying something on Twitter. So again, I want to apologize to the Twitter space out there. I'm sorry I had fun, okay? I'm sorry I enjoyed something. And you know, before spending way too much more time talking on this, let's just die it off right here. Let's kill the dialogue. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.